Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Hawken Carlton here, and I've got another plant video for you guys today, taking advantage while this thing is actually in bloom. One of the groups of carnivorous plants that I have struggled with for many years is that of the tuberous sundews from Australia. Now, sundews as a group are often referred to as pretty easy to grow plants. Some species are the very first carnivorous plants that people encounter, like Drosera tokyensis and spatulata in your big box greenhouses and clearance aisles in the veggie section at grocery stores and such. But there are some groups of sundews that are a whole lot more difficult to grow than others are because they are a world apart from your standard little tropical rosetted plant. They're still, of course, sticky-leaved carnivorous plants like all the others in their genus, but these guys are in a separate subgenus altogether. So the tuberous sundews come in kind of three different groups. You have the erect scrambling group that produce these long stems that either stand upright on their own or they lean on vegetation in the area to help them grow upwards until they reach full size and begin to flower. You have the fan-leaved tuberous sundews, which produce these whorls of leaves around the stem that look like spreading fans, and they are often some of the weirdest and most interesting looking of the group, at least in my opinion. And then you have the flat rosetted species that just produce these big, flat leaves right on the surface of the soil. The species that I've got for you today is Drosera auriculata. This is one of the erect growing tuberous sundews and part of what is known as the peltata complex. These all used to be subspecies or recognized as just varieties of one widespread Drosera peltata. Work over the past couple of decades has since split most of them into separate species and erected brand new species out of the group. So you have Drosera peltata, the original species in southern southwest Australia. You have Drosera auriculata, which is another one of the original ones that was first separated out as its own species. Then you have others like Drosera gunniana, hookeri, Drosera yilgarnensis, salina, Drosera lunata, which is one of the only tuberous sundews that is not found solely in like southwest or southern Australia in general. It actually grows all the way up into Queensland, into Indonesia, even up as far as into India and Japan even. So it's actually a tropical tuberous sundew. Now most of these guys, including auriculata and such, these even actually extend not only through southeastern Australia, but also down into Tasmania and New Zealand. They tend to grow in southeast Australia. It gets a little weird. Most of the southwestern tuberous sundews grow as winter growing sundews. So summers are hot and dry, and these guys die back to, as the name suggests, a tuber, or more accurately, a corm, a little tiny storage organ deep underground, deep within the pot, that holds all of the energy that they need to start growing the next year. And then in winter, when it gets cool and when the rains come again and the soil becomes moist, they start growing. In southeast Australia and Tasmania, New Zealand and such, sometimes they switch instead to becoming more like a temperate sundew, growing when it's warmer during summer and going dormant during the freezing winter weather in some cases. Now in the lowland areas where it's kind of cooler temperate all year round, kind of maritime climate, they still follow the same winter growing, summer dormant pattern as others, but you will find some alpine or very southern populations that will behave differently. So kind of a weird group, and that's one of the things that makes them kind of a beginner-friendly tuberous sundew to work with, because they're kind of flexible on the conditions that they tolerate, and thus if you make mistakes with them, they'll forgive you a lot more easily than some of the other groups like the rosetted tuberous sundews or the fan leaves will. So if you keep the soil a little too moist in summer, or if it gets a little too warm in winter, these are a lot more likely to forgive you for those mistakes than not. Now, Drosera auriculata is pretty average for the group. They grow stems up to between 1 and sometimes up to 2 feet tall. They start out, when they sprout from seeds, they start as these tiny little rosettes of sundews. They look pretty much like a lot of other species of sundews from around the world. Little rosette of flat leaves across the ground. They've got the little paddle-shaped lamina at the end of the petiole. And then as they grow, usually in their first year, they develop a nice big rosette, and that's it. They die back from there after feeding all through winter into their tuber. And then the next season, they form the big rosette again. Then they start growing up and up and up. They form this stem going upward where the leaf changes shape. It doesn't have the flat petiole and the paddle-shaped lamina anymore. Instead, it forms this little almost peltate, hence the name peltata complex for the shape of these leaves. They produce these peltate shield-shaped leaves. So the petiole is this thin, round thing that comes in and sticks to the back of the petiole, and then the leaf lamina forms, again, the shield or kind of kidney-shaped lamina that actually spreads outward and catches insects. Oftentimes it has these little, almost antenna-looking, really long tentacles at the top corners of the leaf. And then once it reaches full size, 1 to 2 feet up, it starts producing flower stalks. Sometimes it'll branch a couple times. Usually it'll grow up, and then right at the end of the stalk, it produces 1 to several little buds. And Drosera auriculata can be separated from a number of the other species in this group by the fact that if you look at the buds, they have no hairs. Like the entire plant is glabrous. It has no real hairs on it, and it includes on those sepals of the buds, no hairs on those sepals. Other species in the same area, like hookeri and gunniana, have a bunch of little pubescent hairs all over those sepals, and that's one way to tell this species apart. Auriculata is a little bit variable in flower color. The flowers are usually around 1 centimeter, maybe a little bit larger across, and they can be white or they can be like this variety, kind of a pale pink, sometimes to a bright pink. Now these plants, they're a little bit variable. Some forms will self-pollinate. Other forms, like most tuberous sundews, require cross-pollination in order to produce seeds. When they produce seeds, of course, that flower shrivels up, the seed pod swells up, and then the seeds are also distinct for this species. Most others in the peltata complex have these little kind of ovular or rounded seeds of various structures. These guys are kind of unique in the group in that they have these much more thin, almost filiform type seeds. So that's another thing you can use to identify this species. They have a very distinctive seed structure from all of their relatives. So they grow up, they flower, and then, again, come springtime, come late spring, early summer, when the soil starts to dry out or it gets too warm, the light period, the photo period starts lengthening, they die back into dormancy again. So it's a very unique growth pattern that is not seen in a lot of other sundews, and so that makes it really sought after for the collectors, because it looks completely different from all other sundews around the world, really. And because of the tuberous nature of this sundew, of course, it is a little bit more difficult to grow than your average species. So there are some things that have to be kept in mind if you want to try and grow these guys. First one is tuberous sundews in general like a very sandy, well-draining soil overall. Now again, these guys are a little more tolerant than others, so they can often pass by on your standard like 1-to-1 peat perlite mix, but a recommendation would be a little bit sandier than that. If you're using actual sand, then like a nice clean quartz sand, or another neutral option like blasting abrasive. That's usually neutral, it doesn't add anything to the soil. So like a 2-to-1-to-1 is often what I do. Peat, blasting abrasive, or sand, perlite, blasting abrasive, and then peat soil, so that most of it is inorganic, kind of mineral in structure, and then just a little bit of peat to kind of help hold in moisture. Sowing seeds is pretty easy, straightforward for these guys. You sow them preferably in late summer to early fall, and then given a few weeks to a couple of months, the seeds start to sprout. Now, when they are growing, You want to keep the soil moderately moist. They can actually take fairly swampy conditions while they're growing, so long as all other conditions are fine. But if you keep them just moderately moist, so there's always maybe quarter-inch or so water up to the bottom of the pot, you can let that dry out before adding more, then they'll do fine. While they are growing, one of the most important things is these guys are controlled by both temperature and photoperiod when they do and do not grow. So if you want to keep them growing, keep the temperatures low and keep the photoperiod short. Because since these guys grow down in southern Australia, where winter daylight is very short, sometimes 8 to 10 hours only, these guys are kind of primed to follow that. So you have to have lights on a timer that you can adjust so that, or have your plants under natural sunlight if you have appropriate conditions. Otherwise, if you can keep the temperatures cool, so that they only have 8 to 10, maybe 11 at most, hours of sunlight during the winter, and then temperatures that preferably stay below 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and especially drop at night so that they stay cool. These guys can take almost down to freezing. In fact, some locations during winter will actually experience frost, especially the alpine versions or versions down in New Zealand and Tasmania. So down very, very cold, these guys are fine with that. If they're growing in the 40s or 50s degrees Fahrenheit, they're okay with that. It's just you need to avoid temperatures going up. So avoid temperatures reaching 75, 80, 85 degrees Fahrenheit, because as soon as they start experiencing that, these guys will die back. And if they do that too soon before they've gathered enough energy to develop their tuber again, you won't see them the next year. So keep them cool and keep the photoperiod short. After they've flowered and set seeds, then it's fine for them to experience warming conditions as springtime and summer arrive. You let the light increase, temperatures increase, they'll go dormant, and then during dormancy, it's best to keep the soil almost completely dry. You might add a little bit every couple weeks just to have a little bit of moisture so that the tubers down there don't desiccate completely, so they have just enough moisture to stay firm, but you don't want to keep them wet usually during summer. Now again, a lot of the Peltata complex are a little bit more tolerant of wetter conditions than others, but if they're kept wet or much more than barely damp, you will often see them rot. So it's important to keep wet in winter, but dry in summer. Cool in winter, hot in summer, and then of course, short photoperiod in winter, long summer days during the warm times. But this is certainly the species, one of the species you want to start off with trying to grow before you go towards growing some of the more difficult tuberous sundews. Now that's all I have for that species at the moment. If there's anything I missed or if there's any particular questions you might have for these guys, you can leave comments down below the video here. And of course, if you want to find more information about these guys, I don't have a file for this one up, but if you guys want to see me put one up, I can put that up on the database at the website, carletoncarnivores.com. There's a lot of files for other species of sundew and a few other carnivorous plants up already, though, so you can check those out. If you enjoy educational videos like these, you can always help support them by becoming a Patreon member at patreon.com/hcarleton, or making one-time donations at Coffee, ordering merchandise at the Spring Shop. All the links for these will be in the video description below. Members at Patreon do get exclusive benefits back, including access to the monthly seed contests that I do, early access to the videos, exclusive merchandise, early notices to any new plants or other items that I'm going to put on the website shop at carletoncarnivores.com. If you can't support in a monetary manner, simply giving attention to the channel really does help, so give a like, give a comment below, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the black bell so you don't miss any updates that come later on. And then if you want to see more information, little tidbits, videos, photos, and so on, I'm always posting things on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, etc. So you can check there. But until next time, I'm Hawk and Carleton, and this is Carleton Carnivores.